the Premier League chat in general, and starting with Newcastle United, who are a club who have been linked with both Joe Gomez and Jarell Quansah, but they are also doing other bits. And Eddie Howe's flexing his muscles a little bit after winning his latest power struggle battle. You got to say, I didn't see it coming. This guy surprised me so much. Credit where it's due. I did not see this coming. So what's the latest with Newcastle in terms of business they're looking to get done?
Yeah, Newcastle have put quite a few lines about this out, and they're using this phrase specifically in their PR about there being quoted Saudi tax, because they know they're backed by the Saudis, that every player Newcastle go after, there's money added on, like in the old days, like it used to be with Chelsea and such. So they've quoted that. And because Paul Mitchell lost out in the power battle, we're almost back to Eddie Howe's targets from last summer. And on the screen there, they tried for him. Anthony Elanga didn't get him, so he's been linked now again, that Newcastle are trying to get that money done from the speedster for Nottingham Forest. João Pedro, another option at Brighton. But again, that's been down the list because they've not been able to get players like Mbeumo and others they were after. So that comes into the mix at the same time. Centre halves as well. Mark Gage, remember they spent all last summer messing around with Palace, that he's back on the radar for them as well. Quansah's been linked. And again, if Newcastle, who do like Quansah, are going to make a move for him, you just think almost now it'll have to be Gay to fall through again, or Quansah, to stick at Villa, that type of scenario. But it is interesting for a club that's in the Champions League and is Saudi backed. They're really struggling to do deals at the moment. So will be interesting to see who and if and when they land any of these players.
Yeah. You remember these rules? Aren't there supposed to be some rules about spending? I remember something about rules. But, I look forward to the latest Chelsea strategy around those rules and what they can possibly sell to themselves next week. Because Chelsea aren't really in our chat this week, so I just wanted to give them an honourable mention. Arsenal, however, are. And Arsenal have been linked with, certainly they were linked with Gyökeres, less and less of that now, as Šeško seems to have taken over as the primary target for them. They made a very useful goalkeeping signing for Buttons. And like I said to you earlier on, they seem to be getting the run around by our friend Mountain Nonce, who has decided that maybe he's not 100% sure about all of this, and the summer's very long and you never know. So the Zubamendi thing might be not as real as they were hoping it was going to be. What is the latest with them? Because I know there's at least one more really high-profile link with them as well.
I tell you what, we don't blow our own trumpets often, as you know, but did we or did we not say when we started doing these on the lead up to the summer that when all the Arsenal Zubamendi stuff was coming up, just keep an eye on Real Madrid? That could be the one that trumps it all. And funnily enough, what are all the stories coming up at the moment? That Real Madrid are trying to make that move. So it is one to keep an eye. And it would be hilarious because Arsenal fans made all this noise, didn't they, about he turned you down, but we've got it. Like no one else was in for him this summer at all. We'd moved on, he'd moved on. But, it would just be hilarious if they fell flat on their face. And this one on the screen, Trev, Kepa, the Chelsea keeper, who was signed for, I think it was a world record at the time, wasn't it? 70-odd million, could now be going to Arsenal from Chelsea for about £5 million. That's just absolutely mental the way that's gone, hasn't it? And yeah, Gyökeres, as we said, seemed to be the one, but even Plettenberg's been speaking about it today, that he's actually said on German Sky Sports, fully expects Šeško to end up at Arsenal. That's what the suspicion is, around 80 to 90 million euros, which, famous last words, you never know what will come up. But considering everyone talked about Lego Head needing to win now, and this was his last chance this season to really do it, a project forward is a hell of a gamble, which is exactly what Šeško is if that goes through. So it is interesting, the nature of the business Arsenal are doing. There's nothing that really makes you think that's going to bridge the gap, does it at all?
Not at all. And the more struggles little Lego has for himself, the better I will be feeling. United, we know, need to do a few bits. I'm not sure I like the sound of some of the business that they're being linked with. They've made a good start with a fella who may be a dreadful set of lads by reputation, but is a very, very good footballer. They've already made that signing from Wolves. But they're also linked with Brian Mbeumo, aren't they? And everyone seems to be linked with Gyökeres. So what's the latest? Because we know there's a few boys very much on the outs there at United. And there are a few ways that they can look to make some money. Garnacho seems to be, schoolboy mortal enemies with Amorim. So what's happening there in terms of the latest with them on ins and outs?
Yeah, there's a few reports, isn't there, that Mbeumo has made it clear to Brentford that he wants to go to United. That's where he wants to go to, despite the involvement and interest from other clubs. So we have to watch that. Yeah, Gyökeres to United seems to be gathering momentum. It just seems mad that we talked about Gyökeres and expected him to end up at one of Europe's big boys, didn't we? And all the clubs he's been linked with, to now maybe end up at United, who, let's be honest, aren't even in Europe next season. There's all these question marks. Why isn't Gyökeres wanted by all the big boys? It's interesting, isn't it? A little bit. So we'll see what happens there. But outgoings, I still can't believe that a few United journos are mentioning this. Inter Milan are still looking at Rasmus Højlund. God knows why. It's absolutely, he's been a stinking in the Premier League. And I know people will say he's young, but, maybe they're seeing something I'm not. And yeah, Garnacho. United are still just touting around the Ritalin kid, aren't they, to be honest? I think they just want to get as much money as they can for him as possible. But it's just bizarre again, isn't it? You just wonder how United's business is going to work out, because it's clear, despite the PR, the massaging, they wanted Bruno to go to Al Hilal, didn't they? They wanted to get that 100 million plus bag in, and then they could make moves and try and do what they could. So I am just intrigued how this all pans out in the long run.
Yeah, it's going to be very interesting. And I don't think the comedy is over there yet, which is lovely. Spurs have pulled off what could be considered the biggest dick move of the summer so far, with everybody's mate getting the sack. And it looks like, after the excitement of making the move that to Brentford, that now Thomas Frank may be about to abandon ship there and go and join Spurs, which I don't know what I think about that, just purely from a professional perspective from him. You look at how some of the big managers have gotten on there.
Yeah.
It hasn't gotten well. And if I recall correctly, it was only a couple of weeks, maybe a month, when Ange was in front of the microphones, seeming really disillusioned with the state of things at Spurs and what it was that the reality of his existence was going to be. So, Thomas Frank, man, I'm not sure that's a great move for you. But they are still being linked with some big players, including the aforementioned Mbeumo, and everyone seems to be linked with Branthwaite at Everton.
Yeah, you look at the managers that failed under Daniel Levy, the coaches, haven't you, like Conte, Mourinho, all the experience in the game. I like Thomas Frank. He comes across as a nice guy, doesn't he? A decent guy when he does interviews, like a good, solid football guy. And I get why he's doing this, because it's a Champions League club and it is a step up. But like you, I think long term, you probably see this, or anyone under Daniel Levy, going one way, in all honesty, which is a bit of a shame. And it's funny that as this is coming out, a lot of the reports are that De Zerbi, do you remember the former Brighton one who went to Marseille? He turned it down as well. So that's a shame, because De Zerbi's a bit unhinged. So that could have been a bit funny. But Thomas Frank, it looks like it will be. We expect this to happen. And also the reports, as you mentioned a few there, that Thomas Frank wants to take Mbeumo with him, has told him to hold off on the United front and, maybe make that move. And then even there's a couple more come out in the last few days. You mentioned Jared Branthwaite. He's being targeted by Spurs from a move for Everton. And then even tonight, as has come up on Sky and a few others, Tottenham also looking at Antoine Semenyo at Bournemouth as well. So it will be interesting. I think we expect Frank to go over there, who he targets, or actually how much is he even involved in the recruitment? I get why he's doing it. It's a Champions League club. It's a step up. But I like Thomas Frank. And I think we all know how it ends up under Daniel Levy eventually.
Also, can you imagine the head on poor Queven Keller? I mean, he gets his move and then it looks like the whole thing is just sort of falling apart on him. Anyway, the rest of the Prem then, a few bits and pieces involving Bournemouth and Brighton and a few other clubs. I'll let you wrap this up. A lot of people very, very impressed with Manchester City's incredibly restrained spending of only X amount of millions to get in the likes of Reinders, and it looks like Ait Nouri as well. So to be fair, there's a few bits and pieces left to tie up here.
Yeah, the Club World Cup teams, City are a full foot to the floor, aren't they? That Nouri's now done. That was confirmed in the last hour, waiting for the confirmation over Cherki and Reinders. So, yeah, that resourceful and plucky Manchester City, who spent 200 million in the January window, are about to spend about 200 million in window one. I wonder what might be happening to them or what might be find out in the future. We'll have to see on that one. Chelsea are, interestingly, the opposite. They're trying, but they seem to have stalled on Ekitike because, funnily enough, they've realised that Frankfurt won't budge on that price, as we said before, because they're in a strong negotiating position there at the same time. We've talked about Mangan, the keeper. They're still trying to do that deal to get a seventh keeper through the door from AC Milan there as well. And even this one is still ongoing. They're trying to sort that Jamie Gittins, aren't they? It is interesting because if they want them for the Club World Cup, Chelsea have got a shed load of business to do in the next 24 hours, literally the next 24 hours, haven't they, to match City and get these players through the door. So I'm intrigued to see what happens on that one. Other sort of Premier League news, Bournemouth, Trev, they're getting absolutely gutted, aren't they, by the looks of it? Huijsen gone, you expect Kerkez to end up at us. And now Zabiani's told them, and understandably, he wants PSG. Greatest respect to Bournemouth. Why wouldn't you want to go to PSG for a bigger wage? That contract, the European champions. So their defence could just be absolutely gutted by the end of this window. So that's another one to keep an eye on. And then Brighton. Brighton just sign weird and wacky players, don't they? They love a forward from anywhere, Brighton. And they signed Zimas, that player that we talked about, that we looked at one time. Yeah. And now they're after another Greek forward who, I'm not going to try and pronounce his name, but let's just say he's worth about 87 at Scrabble, in all honesty, from Olympiacos. So that one is in the mix. And then I saved these Machiavellian stories because I know you love them, Trev, and I know you love a little bit of drama in the Premier League. And this is Forest and Palace and their owners. So Palace have John Textor, that American who also owns Botafogo, and Leon as their secondary owner. Forest have that mad Greek, Mavropanos, don't they, in charge there. Now, they teamed up. Do you remember we talked about last week that because he needed to raise funds, Forest were buying 3 players from Botafogo. Do you remember that? To help them and give Textor a little bit of cash so he could move it around. And in return, Forest were selling 2 players to Leon dirt cheap, Danilo and Matt Turner, the goalkeeper. A good little relationship between the Forest owner and the secondary owner of Palace. And how's it spilled out this week? The Forest owners knifed him in the back. Big trouble, because having teamed up, Forest have now written to UEFA saying, why can Crystal Palace be in like the Europa League with their ownership situation? So having pretended to be his mate and done deals like this, The Palace owner, the Forest owner has knifed John Textor in the back, big style while he's down. So we just love these little subplots that rear the head. And then the other thing to mention is the Premier League lost its case against Chelsea and selling assets. So whatever happens at the end of this window, Chelsea can still sell their second 7 netball team to clear the debts to themselves at the end of it.
It's just fantastic. I mean, I won't lie to you. I almost admire the fucking gall and the way in which they managed to just keep getting away with it. You know, you could say that them's the breaks, and if you can get away with it, you know, hats off. So it's interesting. It's going to be very interesting to watch those. That's a tremendous little bit of scandal. Love all that. I'm still hoping for a pyramid scheme story before the end of the summer as well, because we love a pyramid scheme.
Trev. I love it when these shows. Mo Mohammed's got it, and it's just flashed up on mine. Don't know if it's true, but as Ben Jacobs has reported tonight, who does seem to get a lot of Saudi news as well, Al Nassr are prepared to offer 85 million euros plus for Luis Diaz. And maybe even there might be a few developments in the near future. Oh,
that's exciting. But again, does Luis Diaz want to be 85 million? But anyway, look, I like it. Anything that breaks in the show is good. So thanks for bringing us that. Who was that? Sorry, that was... Who was it brought us that news?
Mo Mohammed there. Shout out to Mo.
Thanks, Mo. Fair play to you, man.